Today we will learn about George Washington's presidency. Before we begin, here's some background information about George Washington. George Washington was from Mount Vernon, Virginia, and was indeed a slave owner. He believed in a strong central government. He was also a war veteran in both the French and Indian War and the Revolutionary War, and he was elected unanimously by the Electoral College, becoming the first president of the United States under the Constitution. This means every single state elected him to be president. During Washington's presidency, he set a few precedents, or things that were done for the first time ever. He set up the judicial branch with the Judiciary Act of 1789, placing justices in the Supreme Court. He also created the first cabinet. Secretary of State was given to Thomas Jefferson, and his job was to handle foreign affairs. Secretary of Treasury, or the person in charge of finances, was given to Alexander Hamilton. Secretary of War, or the person who was in charge of war issues, was Henry Knox, and Attorney General was given to Edmund Randolph, and his job was to counsel the president on legal matters. He was also the first president to establish a two-term presidency. This will be later known as the 22nd Amendment. After the Revolutionary War ended, the country had an enormous debt to pay back to countries like Holland and the Netherlands. In order to fix this problem, Alexander Hamilton, as Secretary of Treasury, proposed an economic plan. Within this plan, the national government would take on the country's whole debt and pay it back using taxes. It would also create a national bank to hold the nation's funds and print paper money. It established a protective tariff, or a tax on imports, that made people want to buy U.S. products because it made them cheaper. It also made the excise tax, which was mostly placed on the sale and distribution of whiskey, which was a very popular drink in the countryside at this time. Although Alexander Hamilton's plan sounded like a good idea, it actually caused friction in the cabinet between Hamilton and Jefferson. Thomas Jefferson did not believe that the federal government had the power to create the national bank. Because of this, Hamilton and Jefferson became enemies and created the first two political parties. Hamilton's supporters will be called the Federalists, and Jefferson's supporters will be called the Democratic Republicans. Neither of these parties are related to our Democrats and Republicans today. The plan also caused the Whiskey Rebellion. Farmers revolted against the excise tax, but the rebellion was put down when Washington arrived with the army. So while this was a bad thing, it also proved that the federal government had the power to put down rebellions, which it did not have under the Articles of Confederation. Another issue Hamilton faced with his economic plan was gaining the support of the Southern states. After the Revolutionary War, the Southern states were very quick to pay off their war debts. They did not think it was fair that under Hamilton's plan that they would have to pay taxes to pay off the North's debt. So in order to gain support from the Southern states, Hamilton proposed to move the capital closer to the South. Previously, our nation's capital was being held in New York City. By moving it to Washington, D.C., located between Maryland and Virginia, he had hoped to get them on board. And he was right. The South will pass the economic plan because we moved the capital to Washington, D.C. Washington faced many issues during his presidency. He faced foreign affair issues, Native American issues, as well as the issues of the political parties. Today it's normal for us to have political parties, but Washington actually didn't believe in them. The split in opinions between Hamilton and Jefferson gave rise to our first political parties, but it also made things impossible to get done in the presidential meetings. Washington saw this split as a danger to national unity. When Washington took office, he issued a statement called the Proclamation of Neutrality. This said that the U.S. would stay out of all foreign issues, but it did not stop other foreign nations from interfering in our country. France was inspired by our Revolutionary War and decided to overthrow their king and kill him along with all his supporters and family. They also decided to start up another war with England. France decided to send an ambassador, Edmond Genet, to the United States to ask Washington for aid. The French expected us to help them since they came to our aid in the Revolutionary War. This greatly insulted Washington, who had previously stated that he wished to stay neutral. It also caused problems within Washington's cabinet since Hamilton thought it would be a smarter idea to make an alliance with England, while Jefferson remained loyal to the French. When Washington refused to aid the French, Jefferson quit his job as Secretary of State. While France was trying to gain our support for the war, England was trampling on our rights once again. England agreed under the Treaty of Paris to remove their troops from the Northwest Territory of our country. England's troops remained there after the Revolutionary War and also started provoking Native Americans to attack American settlements. This was a direct violation of our peace agreement with them. Also during the war with France, England started using a practice called impressment. This means they would capture American sailors and force them to join the British Navy. The English were also taking our merchant ships and products which we wanted repayment for. In order to get this, another treaty would need to be made. In order to fix the issues with England, Washington sent John Jay overseas to work out what is known as the Jay Treaty. Within this treaty, two things were accomplished. One, the British agreed to vacate their forts by June of 1796. Two, it also provided compensation for American ship owners, and in return, the U.S. guaranteed the payment of pre-war debts to British merchants. These are the only successes of the Jay Treaty. George Washington was shocked by the lack of support his Jay Treaty received from both the government and public. This was primarily because Jay failed to secure an end to impressment. This also caused a further divide between the political parties, as only the Federalists saw the treaty as a success. Many Americans blamed this on Jay and burned him in effigy in public squares. Also, many Americans thought Washington was selling out to the English and called him a monarchist, meaning a supporter of a king they had previously gotten rid of. This was because he failed to solve many of the issues such as the end of impressment, compensation for war damages to private American property, and the fact that Jay agreed to give the British 18 months to leave the Northwest Territory. With all the stress and pressure put on George Washington during his presidency, he decided to step down after 2 terms. His lasting advice for the country was unity at home and neutrality abroad.